Okay. All right. So we're ready for the last keynote of today. And about 20 years ago, I was at the first OWASP conference in Europe. You know where it was?
Leuven. Leuven.
Leuven? No.
Oh no, Royal Holloway.
Royal Holloway. At the Royal Holloway, I was sitting in coach on the way to dinner, and there was this guy next to me. He went on like blah blah blah, very intense, very focused. That's how I got to know Dennis, and he can be very, very passionate about this AppSec. And he's been doing AppSec. He's been doing some crazy stuff together, and you've been doing a lot of other crazy stuff on your own. That's for sure. And he obviously went full in on GenAI the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to be sharing some of that with us in a very short time frame.
Yeah.
So, big round of applause for Dennis.
Thanks. Right, cool. So I am actually going to go 100 miles an hour. I think most of you guys probably not a bit my style. On the GenAI, I just want to caveat with two things, right? I think it's the single biggest crazy opportunity that we have in technology for a long time. And it's also the single biggest threat that we have in technology for a long time. So from the people who are trying to protect GenAI, just look at the OS top 10. For GenAI, you need to do all of those things, right? My main focus here is how can we make it more productive and how can we make it to change how we operate in our industry, namely AppSec. So that's what I do. I'm actually doing a couple of startups. I'm deep down into the whole world. I'm also just a scientist of another UK company. I do a lot of open source. I do this thing called Open Security Summit, which, by the way, we're going to do it again for the OWASP Summit, which is really cool. So in principle, this is October or December. We're going to do another one, which is this amazing event. So again, let's do a threat modeling track and all that stuff there. And we actually had Simon Wardley coming in on that one. And I kind of did a journey, and actually there's somebody here from the HUD group, which is really cool, right? Because I do put it there as one of my milestones. And I did this journey, which I highly recommend, which is I waited to go into a senior leadership role until I was very late on my career, right? Compared to, I have a lot of friends who went much sooner. And I highly advise that, because it means by the time I got there, I still was probably one of the most technical persons in the room. I still coded, I still shipped, so I built engineering teams. And I was able to kind of like hack the organization from the inside, which is really cool, right? In a good way, right? I was just getting stuff done, right? So I think OWASP and AppSec was never, or are never as important as now, right? Now this is almost like, I feel like OWASP has been building up to this thing, right? And I think that the whole world is going to go so crazy on the whole automation and GenAI and MCP stuff and all that stuff. And they should do, because from a productivity point of view, it's amazing. But we've been there before, right? When you take a lot of systems that we don't understand, that we connect to networks that we don't know, that we give it access to all these systems, and it's highly privileged, exposed to attackers, like what can go wrong, right? So that's exactly what we're doing, right? But the criminals are way more evolved this time. But I'm not going to talk about that, but it's going to be a massive shit show, right? And if anybody doing any stuff with MCP, it's going to be crazy, even without it. But okay, so probably know this quote, right? The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. I don't want to offend anybody, but I think the future is here, but most of you are not living in it, right? And a lot of the stuff that I want to talk about is real, I want to show you, and that's why it's important, the timings that I'm going to show you next, right? And like Jim Manico was talking this morning, right? Like we have to go from doing one threat model, right? Or two. We have to do 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000, right? I think this is our opportunity. And the thing that I always say is cybersecurity and AppSec, we have one unique thing that nobody else has in the entire organization, is we can talk to everybody. We are the only team that can get data from everybody. If we do our job right, we have relationships with everybody, and actually we are the best partner, even with other parts of the business, to get stuff done, right? So, and threat modeling is the best way, right, to do this kind of stuff. In fact, my hack to get people to do threat modeling is I would go to a team, and I wouldn't say, do you want to do a threat model? I would say, hey, I have a risk here that says that you don't know the security implications of what you're about to ship. So click to accept, right? And I don't think a lot of people did, right? Because if you go like that, they're going, ooh, I can't justify that to my boss, right? I don't know what I'm shipping. So then you go, hey, do a threat model, at least we know, right? So I'm a massive fan of threat modeling, right? The question is how to scale. So what I'm going to show you next is what I published since Thursday, like literally it's 2 days ago, right? I was having a debate with, a couple of guys here, right? Avi and a couple of others, And I said this, right? I think threat models should be eventually mandatory, right? And there was a nice debate about allergic reaction. So when I was walking from the conference to my hotel room, I did a voice memo, and I ended up going to ChatGPT Deep Research, and I created a nice 12-page document that talks about threat model as mandatory. Discloses a vision for security transparency. Now, before you say this is ChatGPT, and by the way, I do quote this as me and ChatGPT because it's fundamentally my ideas, this is a freaking good document, right? I read it, right? And I challenge you to look at this document and say, this is BS, right? There's a couple little words or stuff, but like, there's, you know, the point here is that creating these documents are easy now. Right? You create these documents based on an audience. In fact, I think I said this is for the threat modeling conference, right? So, you know, the point of this, I can communicate my ideas. This is even cool. It even has a like wordly map strategy sort of, you know, this is how we're going to get there, right? It's really cool. And then I wrote another document, right, on another, you know, couple of minutes thing, so advanced threat modeling with semantic knowledge graphs. And what I was actually doing is I was creating the materials for what I'm about to do next. And that's what I do sometimes. I create these materials, and then I feed all that to the next LLM and go, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. So this is another cool document, talks about this, semantic graphs, how everything works about, provides background information, highly recommend you to read it. And then another one on semantic graphs to secure the supply chain, because I was going to talk about supply chain, so I was like, hey, might as well get a document on that, right? And then I realized that I talk a lot about graphs of graphs and ontologies of ontologies, and I was like, okay, maybe I should have one of those, right? Because the other key part here is that we have to move away from this idea that there is one definition, there is one way of doing that, because that's where everything goes wrong, right? The point here is that I don't care if every single one of you does a different threat model with a different schema, calling it different things, because actually you will, because most of you speak different languages, different cultures, things mean differently. What we need is ontology so that we can connect the dots, and that's what we get with graphs, right? And what I realized in business is you don't argue with the other side in how they communicate. That's how I got a lot of shit done in the business, because I was just say, what's the rules of the game? How do you operate? And I just play better than everybody else, right? That's how you get stuff done, right? And then the final one is, this is really cool, is that's actually the title of the talk, right? So if you guys want to read more about this, you go here, right? Because I didn't change this, right? So I'm going to present some of this, but not all of this. So I showed them to Seba, right? And Seba was like, well, too long, didn't read, give me the 2-page summary, right? Which is exactly what the exec should do, right? The guy, fuck, don't do that, right? Dude, you know, I'm not going to read your 50-page documents, right? Although I will have to say, I find these documents very easy to read, because in a way, they're already in a language that makes sense, right? So, you know, you tell me what you think. So I created that. I went, again, I fed all those documents to ChatGPT. I think I did to Claude, ChatGPT 03. And I said, hey, give me this for Seba. So you can see what's cool about this is now a personalized translation of those documents to Seba. Takes into account that he works for Torian, he does a lot of training, a lot of this stuff. So I can create one of these for every single one of you. And that's how you communicate, right? And this is now, in fact, this is like 6 months ago, this is a year ago. In fact, the cyber boardroom company is all about this idea of translating security to execs and giving them messages, right, that are personalized to their persona, to their culture, to their language, to what they care about, to the politics. That's cool, that's how you communicate, right? So, I create these documents using Otter AI. It's a great transcription. He kind of seems to understand what I say, which is really cool. No, a lot of them did, right? I go to ChatGPT. I give him my references, and then he gives me this nice, really document, right? So then yesterday, you know, after the road trip, we had a great cycle back. I was kind of inspired. I was like, you know what? I'm going to vibe code this thing, right? I want to do some demos. The stuff I want to show is not that visually. Let's see what I can do, right? So everything I'm going to show you now was created from yesterday at 11 p.m. I think I went to bed at 4, woke up at 7, been coding, probably you've seen me here, took a couple more hours of a lunch, and I did all of this. And this is important because what I'm showing you is that how this is now a commodity, how creating these things, it's not like rocket science, right? And this is like pure vibe coding, right? I don't code like this. I ship enterprise software where I don't let the AI anywhere close my code. But for this kind of stuff, it's actually pretty cool, right? So let's look at graphs and maps, right? And if you know me, right, it's all about graphs, right, for a long time. And then a couple of years ago, I discovered worldly maps, and I was like, this is the thing, right? In fact, if you don't know about what the worldly map, I highly recommend you to. And just for reference, worldly map is the only thing in the last 5 to 7 years that I've learned that I could say was really, really interesting. Everything else was just, like we've been doing cybersecurity for a long time, right? It's, once you see the first SQL injection, all that stuff that we learned, and it's variations of the same thing, right? But Worldly Maps was truly unique. And one of the things that Worldly Maps has is this evolution that you're going to show from Genesis, custom build, product, and commodity, but what a lot of people don't see is you can also do all these other things. You can talk about data, openness, security logs, backups, instance response, all these things. And it's all about this evolution from left to right, right? So let's see this in action, right? This is where it's proper demo time, right? So let's see. All right, so the logic would be that about 10% of this shouldn't work. So let's see which one it is, right? So what you have here is a graph, right? This is a graph, directed graph, where I can move stuff around and it doesn't change the meaning. I can do like this, right? And then as Irene pointed to me, yes, I change some of the things. It's a little bit of a different graph, but the structure is still the same, right? I basically gave meaning to the top. Okay, I have an anchor, I move down, right? But the bottom line is that there's no difference fundamentally between this graph, that graph, and that graph, right? And just to help you to see it, right? Here's a CVE, for example. There's a vulnerability here, propagates here, propagates here, propagates here. There's the same thing, same, and same, right? So in the graph, right, and in the thread model, because thread models fundamentally are just graphs, the kind of the space doesn't really matter, right? And that's kind of a problem, I think, right, in a lot of ways. A map is different. So if I show you this map, and this is a Worldly map, by the way, and the way you read this is on the left, you have a column of Genesis, i.e. the stuff that is sort of new, we're figuring out, we're thinking about it. Then you got the custom build, which is when we kind of have, at least it kind of works, it's repeatable, it's kind of hanging in there. Then it matures, becomes a product, and eventually becomes a commodity, right? So compute did this, serverless did this. If you can even think about scanning, everything, right? You can see there's a commoditization. In fact, OpenAI, when they dropped ChatGPT, they freaking moved, right? Almost AI, literally from custom build all the way to a commodity, right? At least that level of intelligence. Now, if I show you this, we now have context, right? I can now say, hey, hold on, those dudes on the left, right? They're like half baked together, right? Like, maybe we don't even know how they fully work. It's just some dudes who created it, right? The thing on the side is custom build. At least the one in the middle is a product, right? So we can now have context and meaning, right? So that's the first one, right? So what can we do with this, right? So what we can do with this is now, with these Worldly maps, right, is what we can do is we can now do all this cool analysis, right? So what you see here is a Worldly map of a legacy bank. So the way you start to read is you're going, hey, they have a lot of stuff on custom build, right? Like they build this thing, it's kind of there. And this is where when you arrive to these enterprise systems and goes, let's fix some vulnerabilities, they're like, dude, we barely know how the thing is fixed together, right? Like the guys who build that have retired like 10 years ago, right? So that's what happens, but they have some things. And then you got, for example, this one, which is a tech startup, which you could see is a lot more, evolved. They have a lot of good commodity. But what's interesting is they usually have these freaking things that are glued together. They might look really good from the top, but they're freaking chewing gum in the back end, right? They go, yeah, we'll fix it once we have money and once we're successful, right? But now you can have a conversation about this. You can start to understand the maturity, right, of what's going on here, right? And then you have an e-commerce company, and you have a security company, for example. And by the way, security companies tend to be the worst, right? And also security teams, right? If you look at the engineering and the quality of what the security teams are doing, it usually doesn't hold to account, right? They actually tend to be the single point of failure in the whole freaking company, right? If you're not careful, right? You want to compromise the whole company? Compromise the SOC, right? And then you go. And again, like this is a good example of the kind of stuff that happens. And when we talk about mandatory disclosure, for example, or at least having to to have an understanding of what happens in these companies, is I'm sure the marketing department of this is really good, right? We're native, we go very fast, look at how efficient we are. Under the hood, there's some stuff in there built in R, which I've seen. There's stuff in there built in chewing gum, some stuff that like, hey, it works, don't touch it, ship it. Nobody touched that thing, right? And that's how a lot of enterprise stuff ends up going, right? And they're like, yeah, we'll fix that eventually, right? And that's what will bring that company down, for example, right? So, but with this, we can understand it, right? We think about this versus the graph, right? So this is the Worldly maps. That's the power of a map. Things move. And also, what you can do with the map, I'm not going to show you here, is that you can then strategize. Oh, I'm going to move this from there to there. I have a project that is going to, do this. And also, there's things like, I know that once one of those dots arrives at product or commodity, new opportunities emerge, right? So you can play with that, right? And Simon Wardley, there's freaking amazing stuff. Like, there's even like things like town planners, settlers. There's a whole other stuff on this. So then, I went around and said, okay, cool. So this is actually one of my favorite types of maps, right? Because if I'm come to you and say, hey, look, I got a customer who has a user authentication, has auth service, there's an auto management. So this is kind of the systems, right? This is kind of how you do, at least a threat model will have these components, right? Now, we found these 4 vulnerabilities, right? 4 vulnerabilities, they're there. They assume they have the same level of kind of perceived risk, right? The question here is, which one do you fix? Right? Do you fix that one? Payment gateway, auth service, customer portal, notification. Which one do you do, right? So, and sometimes we might even have a really great sort of strategy for this. But what you don't do is put things into perspective. Because at the moment, we can't make any decision on this. So, for example, if I show you like this, you go, oh, okay, that dude on the left has critical risk that is high, medium, and low. But then, again, how do we calculate that? So let's say that what I'm going to say is I'm going to visualize this by response time, right? So one of the very interesting questions to ask is how long, right, can we fix it, right? In fact, that's wrong. As a second, this actually be fixed time. So how long can we fix it, right? And the bottom line in organizations, it goes from minutes, hey, great CI pipeline, from hours, from days, or never. Oh, no, this is weeks, but the next one's going to say never. There's systems in organizations that it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, right? You can't compile it. The code doesn't exist, right? Company went bust, right? There's so much stuff that you can't fix, right? And then you have the attack surface, which is in this case. So this is before, and then I did the QA, right? I went to Izar. Where's Izar? There it is, right? So I went to him, I found him on the corridor and says, hey, check this out, right? Does this make sense? If I explain it like this, do you get it? And then Izar went, yeah, but I think you're missing something, right? You're kind of missing a couple of key elements on this, right? So is that right in the corridor, right? It took like a minute, right, to do this. I went to my prompt and I says, hey, can you change this? And can you add what Izar explicitly asked, which was the attacker view, right? That's the one you asked, right? And he said, I want to know how exposed is this thing? Is he exposed internally, partners, external APIs, internet-facing, right? Now, that's a very cool question to ask, right? Because now you start to have context. So, for example, if a graph looks like this, which one you're going to fix, right? And so the point here is, you see, this is the thing that we always miss, right? That one on the left is critical. And you know why it's critical? It's because it's freaking internet-facing, right? The criticality might even be medium. The CVE of that one might be 2.5, right? But the bottom line is the amount of attackers that thing is exposed are dramatically to the internal ones, right? So we need this context. So this is a really good one. The one, again, I like is that business impact. What's the impact to the business? Does it matter? There's systems that are critical that they can pop and the business doesn't care. And of course, business and customers and data and privacy, so let's glue that together. But sometimes it doesn't freaking matter, right? So why do we fix it, right? And then you got the impact time. So the impact time is very interesting because this is how long does the attack, when pops, actually becomes problematic. So it basically means how long do you have until shit really hits the fan? Right? And that's very important. Because then you got the fixed time. And what you start to see now, and the boxes are different, is that if you have a system, right, that you cannot freaking fix, that the impact is high, that is the most critical thing you need to look at. Right? Because there's something that, yes, might be quite problematic and quite exploitable, but we can fix very fast, and the time to really do damage is very low, right? Then it doesn't matter. But here's the kicker, right? In fact, it's this one here, right? You know which ones, 99 or 95%, I'd love to have the data, we tend to fix and the business tends to fix when we present 4 vulnerabilities. We fix the one that can be fixed fast. You know why? Because there's a development team there. We get a win, we get traction. But the bottom line is it doesn't freaking matter, right? Because actually what we should be doing is focusing on those that when they really hit us, it's a massive problem, right? So what you have with this is now you have business context. Now I can make decisions, right? I can understand how everything works, and then I can make a good risk-based decision based on all of that, right? And I found that these maps are really cool to communicate, right? But the problem is, like, you go to the board and you can't present out there, right? Like, you can't go, what the hell is this, right? Because, you know, like, the board doesn't get this, right? And they shouldn't get it, right? What I've learned when I was presenting to boards and execs is that it's not their job to understand our world. It's my job and our job to understand what they care about and what we present to them. So again, and by the way, everything you see here has been vibe coding, right? It's done with Claude. I go, hey, check this out, do this. You know, I want to present this. In fact, this one was literally done about 30 minutes ago. This one, where I just say, hi, I have all this stuff. Show me the view to the execs. Okay, I got some good prompts. But there you go. So basically, you got this. You got the CISO, CTO, and for each of these, right, I have, look, see the board member is very clean. You got message to send, blah, 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 business impact, that's it. And I really like this thing. CTO has a plan, we're on a case, right? Then you got the CISO, brief to him, the stuff he cares about. He's the CTO, a bit more technical. I really like that, how to communicate with the CTO. That's, again, the stuff I do in the cyber boardroom. And then you got the developer, right? So now you can communicate, right? This is the power of all this stuff, right? So this is pretty cool, right? So that's how you communicate, right? So then what I did very quickly, I wanted data, I created this, a brief, I created this stuff, detailed, I went to Claude, give me the whole sort of environment, and then I created a whole bunch of tools to visualize, right? So this is a really cool tool to visualize what's happening. So this is what a real-world application looks like. You got customer packages, classes, methods, source codes, environment, and runtime, right? That's more like real world, right? We need to do a threat model for every single one of them, right? That's what we need to do, right? So let's do that, right? So then what you can do here is I can actually visualize that in 3 dimensions, right? So then I created this, right? Which basically is lens, which is that guy here, right? So this is really cool. This is like a 3D view of that. It's really cool, right? So you can start to see, and this is important because as it scales, right, you kind of need this kind of UIs to navigate, right? So this is the same view, connect the dots, right? So basically, that's the same structure, right? So I can look at the impact of a CV analysis. Oh, that guy, that guy, that guy. Or let's say I want to look at SQL injection way deep. This is every single component all the way to the top, right? But this is the kind of stuff that we need to do, right? And this is not rocket science, but it's really critical when this is 100% relevant to the audience, right? So it's pretty cool, right? And then just because, you know, we can, right? I then say, hey, let me actually do threat models for all of these. So what you have here is, this is the threat model for every single one of those modules, right? I got the payment processing, I got the transactions, I got the stuff, I got a nice text for the threat modeling, I got a list view of everything, I even have an risk matrix for every vulnerability. So every one of these is a unique threat model for every one of those nodes, right? But that's the nodes in isolation, right? Because what you then do is, hey, let me see how they actually fit together. And then you have scenarios. So this is now a threat model for the scenarios, right? With a risk matrix, the attack flow, right? So this is where I go, oh, I go from here to there, to there, to there, and then I connect the dots, right? So I go from the threat model of the unit to the threat model of all of them together, right? Again, you make these UIs super effectively, which is really cool, right? So, right, and then actually to finalize this, right, I actually have, you know, this nice, so this actually was done with Lovable. It's a nice little supply chain, right, UI, pretty cool, right? That we can manipulate and we can navigate and view the threads. It's actually not bad, right? And there's another one here that I think, yeah, that's just visualizations of the diagrams, right? So again, all of this is created from real data, right? In this case, right? And that's what you need to do. If you're not doing all this stuff, right, we're not playing the game, right? And the point is, it's that easy to do these days, right? So, cool, that's the end of part 1 of this presentation. Right, what I want to show you super quickly, right, is, and you can see this presentation, which I've done in London, right? But the point of this, what I want to show is the stuff I've done for the OWASP, which is the semantic OWASP, where I took the OWASP JSON for the top 10, and then I converted it into, I converted the markdown into JSON, right? Again, using an LLM. Then I have a strongly typed model where I can connect all the schemas, and that allows me to create an ontology for that top 10 with relationships, a taxonomy, and then this is the coolest thing. Once you have that, I can create these highly highly rich things where I say, hey, the least privilege is a type of access control, targets, and caused by a lack of access control and subjects bypass. So this is, the coolest thing is that this is what we do the definition. So we now need this on steroids for OAuth, but every organization needs to do this kind of stuff because this is the semantic part of the web. And to very, very quickly to show where I'm doing this in practice, I'm using this technology to create personalized news feeds for execs. So I take a persona data and I create a whole bunch of cybersecurity articles and then I create a personalized news feed for them. So very quickly, the way this works, you can see this online, there's all the data. And by the way, everything I'm showing is open source, so you guys can use it, right? And that's strongly typed in Python, which is really cool, right? And that's how everything connects together, right? And the key point here is that for every article that exists, right? Oh, sorry, for every persona, I create a graph like that. So that's a representation of a person, right? Where I can have the relationships between, that mid-sized companies I know there, that guys I know there, right? And then I'm going to do the same thing for the personas, that's the CTO. And then what I do is for every article, I create a graph for the article, which is that one there, right? And then, again, you could see that different articles have different things. That's the graph for different types of articles. And then the question is how the hell I connect these two. So I do one more LLM transformation. And by the way, I'm using the LLMs just to help me to create the semantics. And mainly is because the freaking news agencies don't give me that, right? Because they had, I wouldn't have to do it, right? So in a weird way, I'm using LLMs here, and eventually I don't want to use them because it's all about having provenance. See, with this, there's no black magic. I'm showing this article to that person because there's a connection between this graph, that graph, that graph, and that graph, right? And that's why we want provenance and no black magic, right? So again, I'm doing all this stuff. This is Cyber Boardroom. You guys can read it. It's pretty cool. There's a business plan. And by the way, I'm looking for investors if you want. All the data is online. Actually, again, I created all the documents online. There's a chat bot. You can ask your questions about if you want to invest or not, right? And then give it a spin, and then that's it. 25. Woo!
We will entertain one question. Anyway, come on.
I don't need a mic. What's firing in your blood to allow you to run at that speed?
Oh, green tea. Okay. Yeah, I don't drink coffee anymore. No, look, what I love, right, I think, these days, right, is that I feel very privileged to be doing this thing for 20 years, and it's still exciting, it's still great. And by the way, we are all making the world better, right? That's the mission, right? The mission is, we're doing the world better, and I love the fact that I can now do exactly what I want, right? And then, that's what I'm saying, I'm looking for investors, but I'm looking for the one who doesn't think I'm crazy. So it's like that Venn diagram between the people I want, don't think I'm crazy, and the one I really want to work with. It's very small, but if you can find it, it's really cool, right?